All right. Skinny T, we'll start with you on this one. Rebuild, retool, or continue. And let me lay the groundwork for this.
Ooh.
If the Rams season goes on par with what we've seen, they don't make the playoffs, they continue to be beat up. You've got some aging players as well that are highly paid on that roster. Do you think they should retool, meaning just kind of add some more pieces through draft and free agency and make another run next year? Rebuild, which means getting rid of all of the old contracts and moving on, or just continue as they are and write it out? What do you think? Whether it's fantasy football or higher lowers, Underdog has got you covered. Link is in the description. Promo code LSS to get your deposit match 50% up to $1,000 and your one free pick. Underdog, make picks, win money. Shout out to Underdog for being a great sponsor.
There's not a ton of old contracts on this one. There's just some top heavy ones.
Okay.
So, it really does depend on this year. So in your premise, we're talking they're going to lose a lot of games. They're going to win 4 or 5 games this season. That's kind of what you're telling me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the premise.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at that point you got to go into a full scale rebuild. Matthew Stafford is not getting any younger. Tyler Higbee hasn't been himself the last few years. These are 2 of the big contracts. Cup again. Nobody's going to want to move on from him. He's not going to want to move on from the Rams. That's a tough pill to swallow. Can I actually say that out loud? That they should
Now without pitchforks, you can't.
Yeah, I know. But Ryan and I've talked about this a ton. They've come into this year with no contingency plan whatsoever for Matthew Stafford, the most important position on their team. They have Stetson Bennett and Jimmy Garoppolo. You know Jimmy Garoppolo just as well as we do. I watched him in training camp. He cannot throw the ball down the field. He cannot complete a pass over the middle of the field or outside of the numbers to save his life. So
it's absolutely incredible how he fooled an entire fan base into thinking he was actually the guy, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think Kyle Shanahan is a magician with quarterbacks. He made Nick Mullins look like a decent backup and whatnot. CJ Beathard, we can go down the list. He got Sam Darnold the job, but yeah, I mean, if you're looking at an unhealthy Cooper Kupp, you're looking at another year with another year on top of Matthew Stafford's age. Tyler Higbee, Rob Havenstein. These are the guys that have the truly big contracts on this. There's not a big contract on the defensive side right now. So, the rebuild doesn't look as dramatic as it ought to, but there's a lot of heart and soul, not just with the fan base, with McVay, with Les Snead, who's cutthroat for sure. But I mean, Cooper Kupp has given everything to this franchise, so it's really hard for me to look at that and go. But point being is most important position in all of football. You don't have a contingency plan for it whatsoever. We suggested drafting Spencer Rattler as perhaps that guy, but that makes for a very dire 3-year plan. And that's why I say a full rebuild at that point. And beyond that, you go back to those big contracts. Those guys are over 30 or getting to be over 30 and can't stay healthy. And even if they had a contingency plan, that you can't rebuild on that. Now you can rebuild on some of these guys on defense. Jared Verse has looked phenomenal. I believe that Braden Fisk can start making some strides to be really interesting. Kobe Turner's looking great again. On this is all on the defensive side. Steve Avila, really great piece to build around. So it's not a complete teardown where you're just left without anybody and you're shooting for that number 1 pick overall to pick up that future of the franchise quarterback. But I'll throw it to you, Ryan. What do you think?
Yeah,
not over hosting duties.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and Rams fans will hate this, but for me, I'm deciding by the bye, essentially. You go to the bye, you got the Niners this week, then they got the Bears and the Packers. If they go without a win into the bye, I'm deciding right there we're going to turn this thing into a rebuild. And luckily, like Skinny T said, in reality, a rebuild is really just, it really comes down to Stafford. I mean, Kupp is yes a big contract as well. They just signed Dotson and Jackson on the offensive line, but there's no big contracts on the defense. So it's not like they did their big rebuild last off season, and then Donald retired. So the defense, like Skinny said, it's already rebuilt. It's average age of like 24 years old. Like the defense is young and cheap. It's what do we figure out? The offense is like 160 million. The defense is like 35 million. Like the discrepancy
It's like
is
the
unreal.
top and the bottom. Really.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So if they do not have a win by the bye, if I'm Les Snead, and I don't want this to happen because we love Matthew Stafford, the fan base loves him, but I'm going to a quarterback needy playoff team and putting Stafford on the block and either getting draft pick compensation which I think a lot of people are, if I'm being frank, out of their gourd. He's not worth 2 first-round picks anymore, but they can get a couple mid-rounds for him. Or you trade for a younger QB and a mid-round. We put an article out today. Hey, the Vikings, Sam Darnold's looking pretty good, but they got JJ McCarthy in the wings. Do they think they have a better chance with Stafford midseason to take them to the Super Bowl than Darnold? Probably. Rams can take Darnold, finish out the year, see what they have in him, and then go draft someone next year. So I'm deciding by the draft or by the bye if this is a rebuild, or if they can go into the bye and win a couple games, then I would not be shocked if Snead all of a sudden works the phones and starts trading for big names midseason and they go all in again. But if they don't have a win, then you gotta face the facts, and it's time to shop Stafford, unfortunately.
Yeah, this team was 3-6 to start the season last year, and then they fought all the way back to make the playoffs, including a loss in week 14 to the Ravens, and they were still able to make it. So they could make something happen. I mean, you give them 2 wins going into the bye.
Yeah.
They're in actually a little bit better spot than they were last year. So they can still make it.
And go ahead.
And
then go to the 49ers. I don't want to, but just the reason why I think we sound a little more doom and gloom 2 weeks in is last year after the bye, they got healthy. They got Kyren Williams back a week later. Stafford was back. Kupp was back because remember he missed the first 4 weeks. Puka Nacua was lighting the world on fire. The offensive line was healthy. Donald and defensive line was healthy. This year, no Donald. They currently have 10 guys in the IR, so they're out at least 4 weeks. Kupp is the only reason why Kupp's on the IR is because they didn't have enough spots for designate to return. He's in a cast right now, so he's out at least probably 6 weeks. So the difference is they went 3-6. I know you weren't saying this, but just for fan base thinking, like they went 3-6, but then they got everyone back and healthy. We may not get everyone back healthy until week 9, 10, 11, and if they're 1-8, that's a big difference. So anyway, I'm rambling. So go to you.
No, it is a big difference. And I want to make sure that I'm being respectful. When you were talking Skinny T, I was looking down, and the reason is because I wanted to pin your guys' channel into the chat. I don't believe I put it in the description. So for everybody here, definitely check them out. Link is pinned to the top of the chat. Steve-O, I appreciate you for making recognition that I did not have their channel in the description like I normally do. So it is pinned to the top of the chat. All right, the 49ers side of the house. Man, these next 3 weeks are going to be big. And it's interesting because they have all these injuries, right? But it's like everything is shaping up perfectly for them to still go 3-0, at least 2-1 over these next 3 weeks. And then most of these guys should be back, if not really all of them. So you've got the Rams, who happen to be more beat up than you. As many great players are missing for the 49ers, there are more players actually missing for the Rams. No offensive lineman out for the 49ers. You've got 2 starters out for the Rams. That's really the biggest difference on top of the skill position, guys. Then you play the Patriots, who we're watching right now get beat down 24-3 by the Jets, who, let's face it, 49er fans, the Jets are not that deal. At least they weren't in week 1. But for them to win a division game like this, that shows you just how bad the Patriots are. So that's a very winnable game. Then you do have probably the toughest of the 3 games on paper anyways, against the Arizona Cardinals, because Kyler Murray's been playing lights out. But even them, you get a couple of these pieces back going into that game, and they can't generate a pass rush to save their lives. Kyler Murray and that offense, very complete offense. I still think that defense can be had. So I think you've got 3 very winnable games. And at the very least, if you can go 2-1, you're in a good spot. That being said, though, let's say they come out of this somehow like 0-3, disaster strikes, more injuries happen. It's got to be a I'm not going to say a rebuild. It'll be a retool. It'll be exactly what I said should have happened this year. The problem is it's going to set them back another full year because they reworked those contracts like I had said with CMC, Trent Williams, and Debo. And so now that's an added year where you're going to kind of hurt yourself a little bit. But this team is still talented enough to where if you make those moves next offseason, you recoup some picks. I think that they could be a sneaky playoff team, maybe lose in the wild card, but then after that, you can retool and go. So not a full rebuild because you've got a young quarterback, got a young wide receiver. You've got good young defensive players still in Bosa and Fred Warner, Diamador, Lenore, Huff, what have you. So not a full rebuild, but a retool would have to happen. What they cannot do though, is continue with all these big stars that are getting older and paid a lot of money and think that, oh, it'll work itself out if we're just healthy. You're not going to get healthier as these guys age. It's just not going to happen. So they can't continue if they go on this streak here.